This is the Dreamers Podcast, episode 16, with side hustle expert Jannese Torres-Rodriguez from the Quiero Dinero podcast. Today is May 11th, 2021.
I think it's so ingrained in us, especially as women, we just want to help everybody. I think that's it's our genetic makeup. We are nurturers. We want people to be successful. We want to invest in people. And so I think that's honestly what makes us really great entrepreneurs, but it also makes us very prone to overworking, undercharging, and working for free. And so when you're first starting out as a business owner, it's very tempting to accept these emails that you get in the DMs asking you to collaborate for brands. But unless you ask for money, they're never going to pay you. Your skills are worthy. If they weren't, people wouldn't reach out to you. So you need to request some sort of compensation for your time. Your time has a value. Your skills have a value. And if we're giving them away for free, when you do want to monetize, how are you going to do that?
Hello, world. Welcome to the Dreamers Podcast. I am Stephanie Anne-Lyse, also known as Anne-Lyse Wealth. I'm a financial coach and an author. I self-published my first book, Dream of Legacy, a guide to help dreamers reach financial independence and build generational wealth. In this podcast, I'll have conversations with experts and thought leaders who dare to follow their dreams. You'll hear about their journey and their money stories. I hope it inspires you, dreamers out there, to live life on your own terms.
Come on, dreamers, let's change the world!
Hello. Welcome to the Dreamers Podcast. I'm your host, Anne-Lyse Wealth. Thank you for tuning in today. On the podcast today, I have Jannese Torres-Rodriguez. If you're looking to earn more money, then this is the episode for you. Jannese is a money expert, educator, speaker, and business coach. A few years ago, she was laid off from her job, and she decided to lean into this passion project, a food blog. And she learned how to monetize her blog in 3 months. And now it is a 5-figure income generating business for her. When she lost her job, she made the decision that she would no longer rely on one source of income only. And she has 10 different income streams today. And she became a side hustle expert. In this episode, she walks us through the process to identify a side hustle that could be an income generating business for you. Let's get into today's episode with Jannese Torres-Rodriguez. This episode is brought to you by Dream of Legacy. Check out dreamoflegacy.com for resources to assist you on your journey to financial independence. Before we get into today's episode, please go into Apple Podcast and leave us a review and rating so more amazing people like you can discover the podcast. All right, let's get back to today's episode. Jannese Torres-Rodriguez, welcome to the Dreamers Podcast.
Thank you so much for the invitation.
Oh, I'm so glad you're here. Can you tell our listeners a little bit about you and what you do?
Yes, absolutely. So hi, everyone. My name is Jannese Torres-Rodriguez, and I am a money coach, a side hustle expert, a personal finance enthusiast, and I am very, very passionate about helping women of color build businesses that provide them the opportunity to gain more freedom, more wealth, more flexibility, and opt out of the wealth gap, honestly. That's why I want women to own businesses. So I teach my clients how to start side hustles that then they can grow into full-on businesses. I have a podcast, I do freelance writing, and I'm just out here preaching the gospel of money.
So speaking of side hustles, I read an article, you were featured in Business Insider for earning, 6 figures in side hustle. Can you talk about your journey into having multiple side hustles?
Yeah. So I never intended to actually be a business owner, which people laugh now when they hear it, because I've now gotten to the point where I'm preparing to walk away from my corporate career in order to pursue entrepreneurship full time. Kind of the genesis of my entire journey as an entrepreneur was a complete accident. It was a byproduct of getting laid off. I had some extra time on my hands. And about 6 months before I had gotten let go from my job, I had started a food blog. So the food blog was meant to be sort of a creative outlet for me to do something completely different from my career as an engineer. And once I got laid off, I realized that that was probably the universe giving me some time to explore this passion of mine with no interruptions, no distractions. And so that's exactly what I started doing. I dove headfirst into learning all things about online business, social media marketing, how to monetize your social following, how to monetize a blog, how to get traffic to your website. And so for 3 months, I really just honed in on digital entrepreneurship. And once I started earning my first dollar, I was hooked. I'm like, I'm never going back to just working a 9 to 5 and not also pursuing these secondary income streams that have now provided me not only the opportunity to accelerate things like saving money and paying off debt, but now it's actually allowing me to transition out of corporate life in total. And so after I started the food blog, I guess that is honestly what kind of made that personal finance thing relevant for me, because for the first time I understood that money is something that is not just like about showing up at a job and getting it. Like there's so many different ways to get money for your skills and for your talents. And so I started really diving into like personal finance podcasts. And then I learned about financial independence. And I'm sure like you've had this experience too, as you kind of get down into the nitty gritty of personal finance, you find very quickly that the voices tend to be very monotonous.
Yes.
Everybody kind of looks the same and you're like, but where am I represented in this space? And so that was honestly the reason why I created the podcast. I wanted a community of women who look like me, who sound like me, who had my cultural background. We're talking about money and entrepreneurship and building wealth. And since the space didn't exist, or at least I couldn't find it, I decided to create it for myself.
You've said so many things here. I don't even know where to start. Absolutely. And I think that's kind of how I decided to write my book too. I was like, well, there's plenty of personal finance books out there, but where are the ones that deal with our specific challenges?
Yeah.
So I just went down that rabbit hole and here I am today with a podcast. But so what do you do in your day job?
Essentially, I work in quality assurance for consumer products. So I work for a Fortune 50 company. We make consumer healthcare products. And so it's my job to make sure that my team is putting all of the systems and processes in place to make sure that those products are safe for our customers.
And so you mentioned that you were getting ready to actually let go of that job to focus on your 5,000 side hustles.
Yes.
So how has that decision been for you?
I find that it's been more of an exercise in mindset versus money, which I think a lot of people don't necessarily make the connection as to like how much of our identities tend to be wrapped up in what we do for work, right? Especially like I think first gen immigrants, people of color, people who've had families that have come to the United States to basically start a new life and have provided their kids with all these opportunities to get educations and get good jobs. Like walking away from that, which is the American dream for so many people, it's very counterintuitive to the messaging that we've received at home.
Absolutely.
So for me, it's absolutely been a mindset exercise and just, giving myself permission to not just stay in the box that society or my family or my friends might believe that I belong in.
And it's so interesting that you're saying that, because like you said, I think it has to do with like kind of how we are raised or brought up, because just based on the information that you're sharing out there, you're in the best situation to walk away from your job. And most people would have done it a long time ago, but just getting to that point can take a little bit of work. So how many side hustles do you have now?
So I have 10 different income streams, including my full-time job. So 9 of those are through my businesses. And then the one is my full-time.
What are your side hustles?
Yes. So I have to always like count on fingers because I know I will forget one. But so my
That's
biggest
a good problem to have.
Yeah, I guess so. My biggest one is actually a totally passive source now, which is my food blog. So I monetize my food blog through the traffic that is received through the website through something called display ads. And those are simply the ads that you see like pop up on websites. I get paid for those based on how many people come to my website. And that's a 5-figure passive income source, like alone, on an annual basis. So on top of that, I do influencer marketing, so sponsored content. I'm a freelance writer for media outlets. I have a podcast, so I've been able to monetize that through my social media platforms, through virtual events and workshops, through brand collaborations. And I also do some day trading and swing trading in the stock market. If I am interested in something, finding out a way to monetize it, I would say it's almost an addiction at this point. My husband's like, you need to leave at least one thing that you don't make money on so that you can have a way to decompress. So I'm working on that.
So for any of our listeners that are maybe thinking about building an additional stream of income, where would you advise them to get started?
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually have a free side hustle starter cheat sheet that's available on my website. You can just head over to Quiero Dinero podcast.com and subscribe to my email list, and you'll get a copy of that. That worksheet basically helps you think through how you would start a side hustle if you don't already have one. So it asks you to list things like your skills, but not just your skills that you're good at, the things that you actually enjoy doing, right? Because there's a lot of people that are good at something and not necessarily enjoy doing that for a living. So we work through that. And then it's a matter of narrowing down which one you could see yourself pursuing, which one you're really passionate about, which one has a mission behind it, right? Because I feel like when you're thinking about entrepreneurship and side hustles, it's about service. You are providing some sort of solution to a problem that your client is facing. And so you have to tie in that service element to the side hustle. Then it's a matter of validating that idea, right? So going to your circle of friends, your family, and say, hey, I'm thinking about starting a side hustle. Like, what would you pay for this? Would you pay for this? And using them, like as a beta group for testing out your product. Once you have validated your idea, then it's a matter of you got to start going out there, putting yourself out there and marketing your side hustle.
And so you mentioned that your blog alone was generating 5 figures in income. Do you have maybe like some type of training that people can do to learn how to monetize their blogs?
Yeah, so I actually do one-on-one consulting specifically for blog owners. But if you have general side hustle ambitions and you want to start anything that's related to like a digital business, so whether you're a blogger or a coach or you want to start a podcast, I have a digital course called the Ultimate Side Hustle Starter Kit. It is an 8-week program that I work with aspiring entrepreneurs and new side hustlers to basically create a blueprint for what their business is going to look like. Everything from, if you don't already have an idea, we're going to get you that idea. Then we're going to talk about how to market yourself, how to embrace the entrepreneurial mindset, because it's totally different from like being a W-2 worker, how to handle your business finances, things like taxes, creating an LLC, automating systems so that you're not like, what do they say? Burning the candle on both ends because you're working full time, but you're also trying to build a business. So it's a very comprehensive course. The students that I just had graduate out of my first course, they have started earning money for speaking engagements. They're collaborating with brands. They are monetizing their side hustles. And it's like so powerful to see people who, when I first met them, were like, I don't even know what I want to do. And now they're like full on business owners. I'm so passionate about that.
That's amazing. You are an advocate for creators getting paid, not doing work for free. So did you ever do work for free in the beginning? How do you feel about that?
Oh God, yes. So much. Because, I think it's so ingrained in us, especially as women, like we just want to help everybody. I think that's like it's our genetic makeup. We are nurturers. We want people to be successful. We want to invest in people. And so I think that's honestly what makes us really great entrepreneurs, but it also makes us very prone to overworking, undercharging, and working for free. And so like when you're first starting out as a business owner, it's very tempting to accept these emails that you get in the DMs asking you to like collaborate for brands. But unless you ask for money, they're never going to pay you. Your skills are worthy. If they weren't, people wouldn't reach out to you. So you need to request some sort of compensation for your time. Your time has a value. Your skills have a value. And if we're giving them away for free, when you do want to monetize, how are you going to do that? I honestly believe like if you want to change the world, you have to have money to do that. So if we're going to go out there and create businesses that then we can hire Black and brown women to work at, we need to also make sure that we have the wealth and the financial capacity to do that. And how are we going to do that if we work for free?
Great points. So what if you're reaching out to brands
I would say in the beginning, if you are just starting out and you still need like testimonials to validate your services, it's okay to take a couple clients for free just to say, you know what, I'm going to give you this service in exchange for you giving me a testimonial. So then I can use that to, boost my authority and my expertise in the space. But once you have those few testimonials, absolutely not.
Love that.
The only thing that I would say might be worth considering doing, quote unquote, for free is something involving like a media company or somebody who's going to give you press. Why? Because those types of publications, that also has value. That also elevates your brand, but you can't just say yes to working for free to everybody because you have to at least be getting something of value in exchange for your time and your services.
You've heard it from Jannese. Get paid. Don't work for free.
If you've been around for a while, then you know how much I care about financial freedom for all. One thing that often gets in the way of that is debt. That's why I'm happy to announce that I've partnered with an amazing organization called Juno. Juno helps you get lower interest rates by using the power of group negotiation. It is a completely free resource that you can use to secure lower interest rates on new and existing student loans. Head to the link in the episode show notes to find out more. Sunday, Skincare Day, is one of the ways I keep my sanity in these crazy times. Jannese is an all-natural, Black-owned skincare brand carefully handcrafted by parents who could not find the proper care solutions to address their family skin problems. All Jannese products are made of organic and high-quality ingredients, meticulously chosen to give your skin the smooth results and the glow it deserves.
So you're part of the FIRE movement. Do you mind telling our listeners what it is and what attracted you to it?
Yes, absolutely. So I think I always knew that I didn't want to work like a traditional 9 to 5 for the rest of my life, like, save money, retire at 65. That just never felt like what my purpose was aligned with. And so when I first found out about the FIRE movement, it stands for Financial Independence, Retire Early. And it was through podcasts. I'm an avid podcast listener. And the first time that I heard about it was on a podcast called The FI Show. It's hosted by two white men. So while I was very intrigued by the concept, I didn't necessarily identify with it because we're talking about representation matters. And I'm just like, okay, well, there's a bunch of white guys talking about becoming millionaires and like quitting their jobs at 35. Great. Good for them. But it wasn't until I found the Journey to Launch podcast by Jamila Souffrant. And she's a Black woman who's talking about financial independence, living in a high cost of living area. She lives in New York City. She's a mom of 3. And I'm just like, oh, okay, wait a minute. So this is actually something that I could do too, because she's a woman, she's a mom, she's a woman of color. Okay, so now I'm definitely intrigued. And once I started diving into the concept of financial independence, I was hooked. I'm like, I need to make this happen. However, when I did first find out about it, I was still in student loan debt. I had a $400-something thousand mortgage on a house. Was living paycheck to paycheck, even though I was earning 6 figures, tens of thousands of dollars in credit card debt. So I'm like, oh my God, how am I going to do this? Like, what is reality? But the principles of financial independence are essentially scaling down your living expenses, right? So taking care of the big 3, the transportation, the housing, the food, taking control of your debt, paying that off, becoming debt-free as quickly as possible, investing your excess funds into the stock market in low-cost index funds. And it sounds much simpler on paper than it is, but if you're like me, it can feel very overwhelming. So for me, it really started off with just facing my numbers, facing the debt, understanding like what it was going to take to pay off my student loans and my credit card debt. I started getting really aggressive about using my side hustle income to make extra payments on my credit card debt, on my student loans, and getting rid of that because I knew that foundation of debt freedom was going to be what was going to then allow me to accelerate my investing and get to a place where I could retire early. So I'm super excited to say I became debt free in February of 2020, right before the pandemic. And then at that point, I was so used to shoveling thousands of dollars extra every month at my loans that it was very easy to then transition and start funneling that money into the stock market. I've been able to amass a net worth of over $300,000 in like 2 years. So now I'm on track to retire by 45. So about 9 years from now.
That sounds amazing. Where were you? Like, how much debt did you have and how long did it take you to pay it off?
Yeah. So when I started my debt freedom journey, I had about $39,000 of student loans, over $10,000 in credit card debt, and I had a mortgage. I bought a home like 2 years before I started pursuing financial independence. So the first thing I did, I started shoveling an extra $2,000 to $3,000 a month at my student loans from my side hustles. I started really cutting back on all of the frivolous spending. I put away my credit cards. I actually transferred all of my credit cards onto a 0% balance transfer card so that I could pay off that debt without accumulating additional interest. I was living in New Jersey. I moved to Florida, so my cost of living would be basically cut in half. And so, yeah, I did a lot of drastic stuff, but it was with a purpose, and I'm so happy I did it.
I just love to hear your story, right? Because when you discovered the FIRE movement, you were in debt and you were a woman of color and you just did what you had to do. You figured out a way to make it happen. And if it included moving, you did. And here you are now, a few years later with a net worth of about $300,000. So for anyone listening in a difficult situation, that's great motivation.
Absolutely. I think it's just a matter of asking yourself, are you worth this goal? I don't think any of us are ever going to say no to that question, right? So then it's a matter of like, now that you know that you're worthy of this goal, what are you going to do to get there?
Mm. And so you said something too about you had a mortgage and obviously you don't have your house anymore. Yeah. And that's kind of like the American dream, own a home. So talk to us about your decision.
Yeah, I have very strong opinions on home ownership. I think so many of us, especially communities of color, have been sold this idea that home ownership is the only way to build wealth. And I will tell you, I have become more wealthy as a renter than I ever was as a homeowner. And people are just like, what do you mean? Like, how is that possible? I think we don't talk enough about the unseen and the sunken costs associated with home ownership. The property taxes, the maintenance, the repairs. If you are a real estate investor, which I was because I purchased a property that allowed me to rent out one unit and live in the other, then you have to deal with the emotional costs of being a landlord, right? And sometimes that's great. Sometimes it's not. And I think, just this idea that a house, especially your primary home, is a solid, guaranteed investment, it's not that simple. There's a lot of math behind, what a good investment is in real estate. And I think just the blanket statement, buying a house is always a good idea. And for me, it honestly wasn't. I lost money buying that house. I lost money selling that house. I got into tens of thousands of dollars in debt because I didn't have the financial capacity to handle the emergencies. I bought a home with 3.5% down. So I basically emptied my whole savings account just to buy this house. And then things started going wrong and I had no money to fix them. So then it's like, it creates the cycle of debt. If you're not in a financial position to really take on the responsibilities of home ownership, it wasn't for me at the time. Maybe in the future I will buy a home again, but it's definitely going to be with a different lens, right? It's not going to be like, this is an investment because it's a liability. Unless you're buying your house in cash, you just owe somebody money.
Thank you for being very transparent about this. And I think it just goes to show once again that personal finance is very personal. So you can't just listen to what the gurus are saying and just apply everything. You have to do what makes sense for you.
Yes.
So on the Minority Money podcast, you mentioned that a lot of times Black and Brown people view investing as a gamble. Why do you think that is?
Yeah. Well, I think it's obviously because we're not talking about it. So there's no representation in our communities for what an investor looks like. It's very much a lack of education because I felt like that too. My family has felt like that too. My friends, I have friends who are hoarding cash still because they're like, I'm not putting it in the market. It's too risky. And until you have the education, whether that's through podcasts, through books, through exposure, through mentors, you're going to feel that way. Everything that is unfamiliar always feels risky. When you go based on the historical data of the stock market, it is pretty much guaranteed that you're going to build wealth if you're in there for a long enough time and you're not buying random things that have no inherent value. If you're investing in index funds that are tied to the market, you are going to build wealth. All of these generations of people that have built millions of dollars of generational wealth for their families, they wouldn't be investing in the stock market. Follow where the money is, find out what they're doing, and do that. We already know where that is. So just do it.
Yeah, I think a lot of times people don't know where to start and they don't necessarily even know that index funds are an option.
Right.
So they're thinking, I have to find, the hot stock. And that gets a little more complicated. And it really should be for people who know a little more about what they're doing. I think as an intro to the market, index funds, like you said, it's like you just have to be patient. You gotta win.
That's it.
So can you talk to us about your childhood? Where did you grow up? What kind of financial education did you receive?
Yeah. So I grew up in New Jersey. My parents came from Puerto Rico in the 1980s with a couple $100s in their pockets and high school educations. My father is a military veteran, so he was able to take advantage of things like the VA loans to buy a house and build the American dream. For me, the only thing I learned about money was that it was stressful, it was hard to get, and it was something that there was never enough of. So I always knew, even as a kid, like I have to do something in order to make myself financially secure because I did not see that messaging at home. I saw that money was always a point of contention. And it was something that caused a lot of anxiety. And I think that's what drove me to be like really good in school. I got a full scholarship for college, make it happen because you don't ever want to be in a position to feel financially stressed was what drove me more than anything. Maybe in ways that were also unhealthy too. I felt like I always needed to be like an overachiever. It developed a lot of anxiety around money. I developed a hands-off approach with money. Like, I don't want to know what it's doing. And so that, even though I was financially taken care of and my careers were always well-paying, I was in the cycle of scarcity where I was getting into debt, trying to show my quote unquote success by like spending money that I had no business spending. And so, yeah, I definitely attribute that to growing up in a household where there wasn't a lot. And then I was trying to overcompensate it as an adult.
You mentioned that you had a scarcity mindset. So how did you switch that?
Yeah, I'm not going to say that it's an easy process. And obviously, I'm still working through it because as I, plan my exit strategy for my entrepreneurial journey, the scarcity mindset still comes up, right? Like I have these thoughts, if I quit my job and everything disappears, what's going to happen? There's no data to support this happening. There's no reason for me to think that, but it goes back to like just expecting the worst. It's a lot of self-reflection, a lot of mindset work. I do a lot of meditation. I have people in my life who keep me motivated. I have a group of women entrepreneurs that I'm now part of like this mastermind, and we keep each other in that abundance mindset, right? Because we're all on this journey. We're all in this place where we're transitioning out of corporate and into our entrepreneurial journeys. And you can't do it alone, right? When it comes to mindset, it's something that you have to have people that hold you accountable, that keep you motivated, and that feed that mindset for you.
What has been your biggest money mistake?
We could be here for a while, but I think for me, it was the idea that I could out earn my bad spending habits. I was convinced that once I earned six figures, I was going to be great with money. And the reality was that I just had more money to disappear and throw away and have no idea where it was going. Once I came to that realization so I cannot earn enough money to not be reckless with it, I knew that I had to put a budget in place. And that was like something that I had never been taught how to do.
Earlier, you mentioned that you were planning to retire in 9 years.
Yeah.
And one thing about the FIRE movement that you hear a lot is, why do you want to retire? So you just want to stop working and do nothing? So I guess, can you talk a little bit about what retirement looks like for you?
When it comes to, retiring early, it's not necessarily retiring. And I know a lot of people that kind of criticize the FIRE movement or like, well, then you're not really financially independent and retired early if you're still working. The whole point for me is like, it's more about work optionality. It's about knowing that if I didn't want to work, I don't have to. But if I want to pursue passions that lead to my success, that's for me like what retirement actually looks like. It's having the ability to take 6 months off and travel the world, or go and live on a boat, like just doing things that you can't do in real life, right? That's what I want. That it's not about retiring. It's about having the freedom to design my life in whatever way I want.
I like the fact that you highlighted that. I think at the end of the day, even this whole like personal finance journey or, talking about financial independence, it's really about options, just having the option to do what you want to do.
Right.
And I feel like essentially, with you walking away from your corporate job, you are kind of on the path of designing the life that you want.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing for me and why I'm so passionate about educating people about the power of online businesses, especially passive income, like you can build passive income streams that allow you to walk away from your job. I have at this point enough passive income to be considered financially independent. So now everything that I'm doing, like to just continue to scale my business and invest more money, that's just bulking up my reserves and my safety net so that if things happen in the future, I don't have to be stressed out about like, how am I going to pay my bills, right? There's such a level of comfort of knowing that your whole financial security is not based on just like your job. And if it disappears, like, what are you going to do? So even if like the concept of financial independence is not something that may appeal to you, it's in your best interest to have secondary income sources, right? I feel like the pandemic has shown us that even these careers that we thought were super secure are not. So now that we know that, what are we going to do about it?
Great point. I feel like I could talk to you for days. I know that you have things to do. So I'd like to end the interview with a round of rapid fire questions.
I love it.
Tell me about a book that changed your perspective on life.
The Year of Yes by Shonda Rhimes.
I heard that's a good one.
It's so good.
So did you actually implement what she said about just saying yes?
I did.
Wow.
And I'll tell you how, because anyone who knows me from my childhood and like early adolescence knows that I'm super introverted. So the idea of like showing up online, being an influencer, having a podcast, being someone in this space that now like does speaking engagements, this is so counterintuitive of like who I am as a human being. And it all really started with just saying yes to the scariest thing possible, which was putting myself out there. And it's been the best thing that's ever happened to me.
Wow. One thing about money you wish you could tell your younger self.
It's not as hard to get as you think it is.
Tell me about one of the best investments you made in yourself so far.
My businesses, for sure. Believing that I could create something outside of a corporate job.
Fill in the blanks in 3 words or less. Money to me is?
Freedom, security, and options.
Love it. What do you want your legacy to be?
That I inspired people to live their most authentic lives.
So it's been an honor to have you on the podcast. Thank you so much for sharing all your amazing tips with our listeners. What's next for you?
What's next for me? Who knows? I feel like every day in the entrepreneurial world looks different, but I'm definitely looking forward to sharing my I quit story. That should be coming up soon. And then we'll see where the universe takes me.
Love it. So please tell our listeners where they can find you if they want to find out more about you.
Absolutely. So I would love if you check out the podcast, Yo Quiero Dinero, and you can check out our blog to find out everything about me and join our mailing list. You'll get invitations to our events, notifications of new episodes, and you can stay in touch with me and find out all the stuff I'm working on.
Thank you so much, Jannese.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of the Dreamers Podcast. You can find today's show notes and all of the links mentioned during the episode at dreamoflegacy.com. If you enjoyed today's episode, here's what you can do to support me and help more dreamers discover the podcast. Leave a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts. I read every single review and I'll select one review to read on the podcast every month. Subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. Share the podcast with your family, friends, and coworkers. And if you really enjoyed today's episode, tag me on Instagram at thedreamers.podcast and let me know what you liked about it. All right, dreamers, that's it for today. I will see you back here next week for another episode of the Dreamers Podcast. All right, everybody, that was Jannese Torres-Rodriguez. I hope that you're ready to finally start that side hustle. And if you already have one, maybe it's time to think about creating another one. Okay, dreamers, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. On the podcast coming up next week, we have money mindset nurturer and yoga instructor Quiero Dinero. We also have author and serial connector Susan McPherson and economist turned fashion designer Safietou Sek.
Okay, dreamers, time to build this legacy.
This podcast is for general information purposes only. It is not intended to provide any tax, legal, financial planning, insurance, accounting, investment, or any other kind of professional advice or services. Please consult with an appropriate tax, financial, or legal professional to receive appropriate advice based on your situation. Or legal professional to receive appropriate advice based on your situation.